motion of no confidence lodged by...
Alfred Manasseh instructed lawyers to go to court to prevent Parliament from proceeding with the vote of no confidence against Prime Minister Peter O'Neill. This was on grounds that the government needed clarity over whether the Supreme Court had the jurisdiction to instruct Parliament to sit and when to sit. And this is what Alfred Manasseh said on Thursday at a news conference.
I'm looking at it from this point. Why is the court going that far? And then I look at the reference question. It's trying to answer those issues so that you get 3 or 4 men or 5-man bands, sit down, definitively determine these questions. So that once they determine, it binds everybody so we know the parameters. The courts will know their parameters, the Parliament will know its parameters, and the executive government will know its parameters and how the interactions will play. So that is why it's very critical that these questions are answered before the vote of no confidence is taken. So the reference, my application to stay is, say, look, okay, yes, you file a vote of no confidence. Okay, let's stop it there. Let's not deal with it now. Let's deal with this. Let the court set the parameters. As soon as the parameters are set, then we deal with the motion of no confidence. That's what I'm saying.
Putting all of the above into context, this is what it means. Papua New Guinea adopted a Westminster system of government when colonial powers left. In the Westminster system, there are 3 arms of government: the executive, the Prime Minister and his cabinet, the legislative or lawmaking arm of government, the Parliament, and the judiciary, the courts. In order for government to function smoothly, in theory at least, the arms of government cannot interfere with one another. Order. The executive arm cannot tell Parliament what to do or tell the judges how to do their jobs, and the courts cannot issue orders to Parliament. But a 2016 Supreme Court reference sought by then opposition leader Don Ploy did just that. In orders that were later issued, the Supreme Court in effect rewrote parliamentary standing orders and bound the Speaker to address a vote of no confidence within 7 days.
The Speaker is obliged by the Supreme Court judgment to obey, to make sure that the notice is tabled. He takes, as chairman of the Private Business Committee, he takes the notice of the motion of no confidence, which has already been filed, to the Private Business Committee. The Private Business Committee sees the heading a notice of a motion for a vote of no confidence, and is obliged also by the Supreme Court decision to simply take that piece of paper, that notice, per se, as a matter of national importance, and takes it on, agrees that it should be tabled on the floor of Parliament.
Towards the end of last week, when opposition MP Dr. Alan Marat said in a Facebook video that the Speaker was judicially bound to allow a vote of no confidence, he was referring to that 2016 Ploy reference.
I want to caution the Speaker and the leader of government business that their usual short briefing when the leader of government business leaves government caucus for that day's sitting, he goes into the Speaker's office and gives the Speaker a briefing. Parliament is the territory of the Speaker. The Speaker rules Parliament, not the government.
So did the Supreme Court cross boundaries of the separation of powers when it ordered Parliament to sit within 7 days in 2016? That's one of the questions that's been brought to court by the Attorney General, Alfred Manasseh.
There's some principle in the Constitution which talks about non-justiciability of parliamentary proceedings. In 2016, the court said that, made some decisions and said, look, interfere into the parliamentary standing orders. They said, look, no, when there's a motion of no confidence, you must deal with it like this. The court ended up setting the rules for Parliament. Is that what happens? And then you have a constitution provision which says that anything that happens in Parliament is non-justiciable. So what do we do with this constitutional provision if the courts are going to say, tell us how to run Parliament? And then you have a constitution provision which says that anything that happens in Parliament is non-justiciable. So what do we do with this constitutional provision if the courts are going to say, tell us how to run Parliament? Now, looking at it from a different angle. All right, a judge is sitting on a case, wants to make some decisions. The Parliament passes a law saying, look, no, in this case you must decide this way. what happens? What happens to the separation of power, the principles of separation of power, integrity of each of these three arms of government? How do we maintain the relationship?
Order!
On the political front, the decision to seek a stay order is being interpreted differently depending on which side of the proverbial political fence you're on. For the government of Peter O'Neill, the application for a stay on the vote of no confidence is meant to, quote, re-establish the rule of law and the separation of powers. The government is also seeking legal clarity on whether MPs have the right to realign themselves with other parties prior to a vote of no confidence.
In 2016, the court ruling directed Parliament to sit on a specific day, take on a specific motion, nominating a specific person. Those instructions, directions by a court order to Parliament, we feel that is in contradiction to the separation of powers.
For the opposition side, the stay order is nothing more than a ploy by government to delay the vote of no confidence. They have already cited the removal of opposition MPs from the private members committee responsible for the decision on the vote, as well as the 2-week adjournment of Parliament as part of a ploy to delay the vote. The legal situation in its present form compels the Speaker, or judicially binds him, as Dr. Alan Marat said, to allow a vote of no confidence within 7 days from the 28th.
Your failing leadership.
If the application for the stay order is successful, there will be a delay of the vote of no confidence.